As a college student who also loves learning languages, it can be hard to find time to practice the language I'm learning. In today's video, I want to tell you how I personally find the time to practice the languages that I've learned over the years. Now, I want to note that I said practice languages, not necessarily learning a language. In my opinion, if you're starting to learn a language from scratch, the key to learning is by fully immersing yourself in that language. Now, obviously, as a college student or even as someone with a full-time job, it can be really hard to immerse yourself fully in the language and really grasp the basics of the language that you're trying to learn. So, I don't want to talk about that in today's video, but that could be a topic for another video. Instead, in this video, I want to talk about how if you've already learned the basics of a language, you could still have time to commit to other priorities in your life while still practicing the language that you've learned. Okay, so with that clarification out of the way, the first thing that's really helped me keep in touch with French, Spanish, and Chinese is Duolingo. And if you've seen the other videos on this channel, you probably know that I'm a huge Duolingo person, a huge Duolingo supporter. And the main reason why Duolingo has been so helpful for me is because I really do love their streak system. I think a major part of being a student is that you tell yourself that you're super busy with school stuff or with work stuff if you work full-time, and that you don't have time to learn a language or prioritize learning a language. But having a Duolingo streak prevents you from making that excuse, and it forces you to keep in touch with the language every single day. Now, I will say that Duolingo by itself has not been enough for me to keep at the fluency level that I want to be at, especially in terms of speaking and listening. I don't think Duolingo is that helpful for speaking or listening, and so I find myself having to turn to other resources in order to practice those skills. So the next thing that's been really helpful for me, especially in terms of speaking practice, is finding a language exchange partner. At my school at UC Berkeley, we have this program where we can be matched up with a native speaker, usually an exchange student, who would like to learn a language that you already know. For instance, in my case, I wanted to practice my Chinese, so I was matched up with two Chinese exchange students who wanted to practice their English. And so every week, every Monday, we would meet up for at least an hour where I would practice my Chinese and they would practice speaking their English. And so in this way, for at least 1 hour each week, we would be able to practice the language that we wanted to learn. And I'm sure if you're also a college student, that your university also has a similar language exchange program where you can find language exchange partners to practice speaking with. And even if you're not in school, if say you're working full-time, I'm sure that finding a language exchange partner shouldn't be too hard, and it's a good way to practice speaking consistently and without putting in too much of a dedicated effort. As for listening, this can be a hard thing to practice without dedicated effort. I did practice some of my listening skills with my language exchange partners, but we spent most of the time practicing our speaking skills since this was a skill that we couldn't practice anywhere else. So for listening, what I found myself doing was going to YouTube, searching up Chinese language learning, for example. And there's a bunch of these really long, really great 15-hour videos that just spit out a bunch of Chinese phrases that you can practice listening to. And of course, this is available for most languages, and it's a really great free resource for you to practice listening. So what I try to do is, right before I go to sleep, I try to listen to 20 minutes of the 15-hour video. And the next day maybe, I would listen to the next 20 minutes of the video. And in this way, it's not taking up too much of my time every day that I'd rather spend studying or going to class or doing school stuff, but I'm still immersing myself in the language every single day. I will say, however, that listening to the language before you go to sleep every day is a habit that you have to build, and I am definitely guilty of not building this as a habit. And one more thing I want to add is that if you're in language classes right now, I would highly recommend trying to record you speaking with your teacher or whatever native speaker that you're practicing with, because it will be really helpful later on when you're not in these classes anymore and you don't have as much time, but you really want to listen to a native speaker talk. It'd be really helpful to have these recordings as a backup audio that you can listen to whenever you want to. Another thing that you can do is to incorporate the language that you're learning into any movies or TV shows that you watch. As a student, you often like to reward yourself for studying by watching your favorite TV show or movie. And while you can still do that, A clever way to trick your brain into studying the language is by watching that same TV show or movie in the language that you're trying to learn. Now, I personally am not much of a TV show or movie watcher, so I haven't really tried this method, but as a kid I used to watch TV shows and movies with my parents in my mother tongue, and that's entirely how I picked up the language. Yeah, so that's mainly how I study languages in the midst of a really busy semester in college. Hopefully, you found some of these tips helpful and can apply some of them to your own language learning, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one.